Today, yeah, the first thing I'll talk about, is Ferdinand Magellan. We also call it Magellan, as he was saying in the documentary there, who's famous for his expedition that he did. Which, if you know about Magellan, his expedition was one of the first to go around the world and circumnavigate the world, which nobody had ever done before. Of course, and before Magellan, there was not much known really about the world. So things were kind of really mysterious and all that. And of course, I do have that Age of Discovery. We're still on the same PowerPoint lecture that I had before. So, of course, I'll be using that today again. Now I'll blow up the screen for you so you can see it better, of course. I don't know if you know much about Magellan. We'll kind of go into some background about him. He was not actually, if you know about the Magellan expedition, it was a Spanish expedition, but the guy that commanded it was Portuguese, which was kind of a strange thing if you know about this. And yeah, Magellan had sailed for the Portuguese before. In fact, he had actually sailed into like the Indian Ocean previously on some earlier expeditions. And Magellan was very interested in completing the voyages of Columbus, because if you know about Columbus, Columbus had sought a westward route. He was trying to, reach the Indies or India or Asia, and so what he was known for was, sailing for Spain to try to seek this westward route, and they were trying to seek the Molucca Islands, which are near Indonesia. The Moluccas is what they call also the Spice Islands. Is where like a lot of your spices came from, like cinnamon, nutmeg, I guess pepper, also as well. And so that was the reason for why they had the expedition. I think they call it different names, Expedition of the Moluccas, or I think maybe some people call it the Enterprise of the Moluccas, maybe what they kind of nicknamed it as well. And it also included Armada. In fact, it's Armada that went with them. They showed one of the ships, like a replica, which was the Neo Victoria, one of them. But they called it the Armada de Molucca, I think is sometimes what they dubbed it, which was actually 5 ships that went on the voyage, which I believe most of the ships were what they call a Neo, or actually the term they used, the Portuguese used, was a carrack. I think I told you the carrack was a larger ship than the caravel. I think it's about 100 feet in length and can carry more men, maybe like up to 40, 50 men or more in it. And those are the 5 ships that tried to sail, westward, to reach the Spice Islands. The Neo Victoria, that's the only one that would survive. Like I said in the video, the only one that came back from the voyage. The Conception, the Trinidad, the San Antonio, and the Santiago. Trinidad almost survived too, but I'll talk about what happened with that. I do have some other slides I've got too, if you want to look at them later, more about Magellan. Kind of goes into, his discoveries. I'll get more into like, what he, of course, discovers in the world that he's known for. I think the big thing he discovered, if you know about it, was the Philippines and, of course, the Strait of Magellan. Got some more right here if you want. But let me look at the maps here, of course, which is more important, I guess. This really shows you the route that Magellan took as he went. His voyage eventually went around the world. You can see that the Portuguese themselves were already going around Africa. They were going from like Portugal to around the tip of Africa to get to India. And of course, if you know about it, the Portuguese had already reached the Spice Islands, which I think are like around here, that location. But they thought that if you went this way, like around South America, it would be shorter. Of course, they find out that's not true about that. So you can see in that expedition, they think, I guess it's kind of estimated how many it was, but I see different numbers on it. But anywhere from about 260 to 270. That's how many sailors, and I think also boys that stowed away, went on the expedition. And Magellan at first sailed down to the bottom of Argentina. In fact, he was the one that discovered Argentina, if you know about it. And the big thing that Magellan would, of course, discover that's well known is the Strait of Magellan, which is on the bottom, which the bottom of South America is often called the Cape Horn. And the so-called Cape Horn, they dub it. You can't see there, but it's right here on the bottom, the Cape Horn, which he didn't sail down to there. He sailed, actually, you can see, through the Strait of Magellan, which is kind of between Argentina and Chile. So it's like right through here. It's very difficult to sail through here, especially like in the wintertime. And before he actually got there, he lost 2 of his ships. This is true about this. I don't know if you saw a little preview video, the Animaniacs. They kind of get that right about, the ships that are lost. They go from 5 to 3, which is, of course, true about that. And the 2 ships he loses, the Santiago, which you see on the far right there, the Santiago, that one was lost first. It was shipwrecked off the coast of Argentina. And then San Antonio, it actually mutinied. Like the crew, they mutinied against Magellan because the crew was mostly Spanish and he was Portuguese. That kind of caused a lot of conflicts between them. So by the time he sails from through the Strait of Magellan and into the Pacific Ocean, he's only got 3 ships left at that point. Hey, David and Christina, how you doing this morning? You came in a few minutes late. That's good. Thank you. Hey. But anyway, so yeah, we're talking about Magellan, his voyage around the world. So yeah, they say, like I said, they sail into the Pacific Ocean, which if you know about it, Magellan was the one that coined the name. He called it, Mar Pacifico, which meant peaceful sea or calm sea. But over time, they call it Pacific Ocean. But actually, it was not the first European to sight the Pacific Ocean. I'll get to it later, but there was a guy named, you've probably heard of Vasco de Balboa, who was a conquistador in Central America. He was actually a few years before Magellan had actually found it. And then they think that may have influenced Magellan basically to take this voyage into the Pacific and all that. So at that point, like I said, they've only got 3 ships left. So they sailed through the Pacific Ocean, which I think almost a year, trying to cross the Pacific Ocean. Of course, they kept making fun of the different islands that they went to from that little preview video you saw about the Animaniacs. And yeah, they do discover the Mariana Islands, like Guam, where Guam is, Tinian, Saipan. Those are islands that Magellan supposedly discovered on his voyage through the Pacific. And his voyage through the Pacific was not easy. They started running out of provisions, like food, etc. A lot of his men started dying from a lack of water, lack of food. A lot of them got scurvy, if you know what that is, which is you get a lack of vitamin, like vitamin C. Your teeth all fall out, and so it was pretty brutal. And also some of the islands that they came to, they found that some of the natives were like cannibals. They attacked their men, and some of their men may have been killed and eaten by Indians. They also lost another ship, by the way. The so-called, we go back to it, the Conception, it became unseaworthy. They had to burn it. And so at that point, they only had 2 ships left, Victoria and the Trinidad. And from there, they then discovered the Philippines. So the Philippines are the next thing they sailed to at that point, reaching the western part of the Pacific Ocean. This was close to the spring of 1521. And if you know about it, when Magellan was exploring some of the different islands, which if you know about the Philippines, it's made up of hundreds of islands. On one of the large islands of Mactan, they were attacked by some natives, Filipinos, Philippine natives, led by this chief. He was like a ruler named Lapu. His forces got attacked, and if you know about it, Magellan was killed in the battle, called the Battle of Mactan, April 27th, 1521. And so at that point, they were leaderless. What eventually you'll see happen later, they talk about Juan Sebastian Elcano. He would eventually take over. He was this Basque sailor from Spain who took over the expedition. He's the one that would continue it, and you would get them back on track. And then from there, a few months later, I think it took them like another, I don't know how long it took exactly, but probably took them about, I want to say 6-7 more months to finally reach, I think November of 1521, they finally reached the Spice Islands at that point. Now, if you look at that map that you got there, you can see it shows the route that they went back. You notice the red line going back around Africa. Well, the Victoria and the Trinidad both loaded up on spices, okay, to go back to, of course, Spain. However, what happened was that I guess the two captains of the ships could decide which way they wanted to go back. Victoria wanted to go back around Africa to go westward. They thought it'd be shorter to go that way. Well, the captain of the Trinidad decided he didn't want to do that. He wanted to sail eastward and go back the way they came, which is what they were going to do. That was the plan. Plan was to go the Spice Islands westward and go back the way they came. And so apparently what happened was the Trinidad tried to sail eastward, go back to the Pacific, and they got captured by the Portuguese in the Pacific, and it never made it back. So yeah, the other one, which is, you can see the Victoria then sailed westward around Africa. They reached They reached Spain in September. I want to say September 6th, I think, when they came back, 1522. And like the video said, only 18 men survived the expedition, which is, I want to say, like 6 or 7%. That's all that survived. The first voyage, like, around the world, which is pretty amazing. Now, why is Magellan's voyage important? Like, what's the big deal about Magellan's voyage and all that? Well, I guess you could say that it's, it obviously, it kind of, they discovered like new things about the world that they didn't know before. Like, they didn't know how vast the Pacific Ocean was, like this huge Pacific that, they have between like the New World and the Old World. So they found that out for sure. Also, they found out like all the different islands in the Pacific, like the Philippines, which big thing they discovered, of course. They also found out that the world is like, it's round. It's a lot larger than what people thought at that point. I guess it kind of debunked a lot of myths maybe about the world. Maybe there's not like sea monsters all over the place and stuff like that. And you can see like within so many years, like about 50 years, after Magellan's voyage, they start making world atlases, like modern ones, like this one here, the Year of the Orb of the World, which was one of the first ones ever done in the Netherlands. That's behind me. So you start getting these maps of the world that they start kind of creating. That's pretty much amazing, within so many years after that. So that was Magellan's voyage, very famous. And actually, what's really crazy, they attempted it again. There was another expedition in the 1520s called the Loaiza expedition, which had even more ships. How many did that one have? It had 7 ships instead of 5 ships. Almost 500 men went on that expedition. They tried to do the same thing, the same route that Magellan Elcano had done. And most of it got wiped out. Like, they found out like that wasn't a good way to go. Not a shortcut. I think only 25 men survived it out of almost 500 men. One ship. That's it. Crazy. But until they build the Panama Canal, most people are not going to want to sail around South America to get to Asia and all that. That's just not the way to go. the shorter ways to go around Africa. Right, next I'm going to talk about, of course, I'm going to talk about like the other European explorers that came in afterwards. There's that map again, by the way, if you want to look at it later. I just showed you. I don't think I had that in the PowerPoint, but there, of course, there's the map, one of the first maps ever made in modern times of the whole world. But anyway, yeah, you've got these other explorers that come in later. I kind of want to go through, like some of the English ones, the French, the Russian ones. These, of course, are not all of them. I just kind of go through the main ones, I guess, that are kind of famous, that are well known. I've got even a map showing you all the different expeditions that were around the world. Yeah, Sir Francis Drake was another one, the second guy, I think, that did another circumnavigation of the world as well around Africa for the English. So I'll probably talk about them when I get to like the Kingdom of England, all that, their history. But I want to first talk about John Cabot. That one's usually considered the first big explorer that comes next afterwards that we have. So we got the so-called English explorers. We'll talk about Cabot, Hudson, James Cook, and all of that. Cabot was Italian. He was from Venice, so he's a Venetian explorer who actually sailed for King Henry VII, English king, who was the father of Henry VIII, you may have heard of. Henry VII had been interested in the voyages of Columbus. In fact, I think there's a story where supposedly Columbus and Henry VII had ridden back and forth with each other. And he was hoping to get him to back some voyages, to reach Asia and all that. But of course, what happened was that Spain or Castile kind of went with Columbus, and he couldn't do that. So he found this other guy, another Italian guy, to go on this voyage, John Cabot. But his real name was actually Giovanni Caboto, but the English called him John Cabot. And so what happened was he eventually would sail to Canada. That's what he's kind of known for. He's one of the first to explore part of North America in modern times. It's been like, 500 years since the Vikings had discovered the Americas, like Leif the Lucky and all that, Finland. And so they think that Cabot was really looking for a passage to Asia, which would be later nicknamed the so-called Northwest Passage, as you know. And so he discovered part of eastern Canada, which the main thing he found was Newfoundland, which is off the east coast of Canada. But they think maybe Cape Breton Island he may have found also as well near Nova Scotia. And so he claimed that all for England. And so that's going to be important later, in the English coming back and starting to colonize parts of that eastern part of North America overall. I don't have it in there, but I think if you go back to that map I had before, he had a son that was also famous named Sebastian Cabot, who also was an explorer. I thought that map showed you. Yeah, here it is, Sebastian Cabot. He came back 1498 and explored like the East Coast, where like the United States is, right here. So he was kind of, famous as well. So here's Cabot up in here as well. So you have those explorers. Then, of course, the one explorer they really talk about the most, especially in North America, I guess toward the English later, is Henry Hudson, who mostly sailed for the Dutch East India Company, but I think they say he also sailed for King James I, of what would be like Britain later, Great Britain. And Hudson's mostly known for exploring the northeastern part of where the United States is, like around where New York, where New York is, around New York, the Chesapeake Bay area, and also the upper part of Canada. I think I've got a map showing you about where his expeditions went. He actually had 4 expeditions at one point. 2 were in the Old World, I think, and then he had 2 that were in the New World. And you can see in the first one, like around 1609, 1610, you can see he explored the Northeast, coming down like where Maine is, right here, like from eastern Canada, Maine, and then he went all the way down to where Chesapeake Bay is. Explored there first. He came up. They think he may have gone like where close to where Delaware Bay is and all that, and then up through the Hudson River Valley, right here where New York is, and they think Hudson was searching for the Northwest Passage, which is actually more into the northern part of Canada. And then he came back on a fourth voyage, which was 1610 to 1611. And this one, he went up into like the upper part of Canada. Like he found what they call the Hudson Strait, which is right here in upper Canada. And then he also came down into Hudson Bay. And there's a story where in 1611, his crew mutinied against him. Yeah, they were kind of getting antsy because they thought they were getting lost or weren't going to be able to come back. And so he left some of his men there. I think his son too, some of the crew that didn't want to go with them. And so they're not sure what happened to him. It's a big mystery about what happened to Henry Hudson. I think there's a few years later where they found some kind of rock later that had I don't know if it had his name on it. They call it the Hudson Rock or something like that. That has the date 1620 carved in it, I think it's called. And some people think he may have been captured by Indians or something and died later, which is kind of an odd thing about that. But yeah, his crew mutinied against him. He had a bunch of ships that were famous, actually two ships. He had one called the Half Moon, and then he had another ship called the Discovery. They were kind of well known on his expeditions to the actual New World. Because I think which one was it? It was I think it was the Discovery was the one that was involved in the Jamestown colony that was later founded, which was used for different things. But the Half Moon one was the one, I think that was on the first voyage, like when he found the Chesapeake Bay and all that, Hudson River. But anyway, so kind of talking about Hudson. Let me also talk about a few others. Yeah, let me get into James Cook. You may have heard of Cook, or they usually call him Captain Cook. And Cook is considered to be really one of the most famous of the. Oh, and by the way, before I was talking about why is Hudson important, if you go back to Hudson, Hudson's important because it's where the English get a lot of their claims to the New World. And briefly, the Dutch did too. The Dutch tried to take over where New York is. So they called it, I think, New Amsterdam or something like that. And so that's why that's important. But Cook was an 18th century explorer for the British, like in the 1700s. He's a little later. He is considered to be one of the greatest explorers of all time. I'd say he might be in the top 5 explorers at sea that's well known. And he's known for mostly his expeditions that went into the Pacific Ocean, like exploring the Pacific, 1700s. And you see there on the bottom, he was famous for circumnavigating the world twice. And he had a bunch of ships that were well known. You may have heard. There's one right there, the HMS Endeavour, that's well known. He had another ship called the Discovery, HMS Discovery, that was well known. And I think that's why they get kind of the names for like the space shuttles later that NASA has. Remember the space shuttle Endeavour they had? So yeah, kind of named after that ship as an example. The guy was a great cartographer. He would like map all kinds of parts of the Pacific and other parts of the world. And those are some of his big discoveries. Like he found, I guess the big things he found, if you know about it, was New Zealand. He found New Zealand and discovered it was an archipelago of mostly 2 major islands, which he actually was the first to map them and sail around them, like circumnavigate New Zealand's islands. Eastern Australia, he discovered that. He actually sailed into what they call Botany Bay, which is where Sydney is today, Sydney, Australia. He actually would try to colonize it. He left some men there. And the British would later come back and colonize Australia, along with New Zealand, too, as well. In fact, the British would try to colonize a bunch of areas in that part of the Pacific. He found Tahiti, a lot of the South Pacific islands were discovered by Captain Cook as well. A lot of the natives on Tahiti thought that Captain Cook was like a god or something. They thought a lot of the Europeans were gods or something like that. Of course, on Hawaii, they found out he wasn't a god. If you know, he went to like Hawaii, he found them, which was originally called the Sandwich Islands. And on the big island of Hawaii, if you know about the natives there, Hawaiian natives attacked him and killed him. So he actually died on the his expedition to the Pacific. I think it was his third expedition. He was going to circumnavigate the third time, but he was killed on the expedition. He also explored like parts of where Alaska is, like the Bering Sea he was known for. And then he also tried on one of the expeditions, I think he tried to sail to reach Antarctica. He saw, I think, the coast, and he turned back. So he was a great explorer, Captain Cook, all that. All right, yeah, let me move on and talk about also some of the explorers that were like French that came in. They had another explorer that was well known, who was Jacques Cartier, and he was a French explorer, I believe under the king at the time, which was King Francis I. And he was one of the, I think that was one of the Valois kings of France. And Cartier was well known for his discoveries. He sailed to the New World. I believe it was like, I want to say 3 expeditions that took place from about 1534 to 42. Cartier was the one that was, he was trying to find like that northwest or northeast passage, whatever they called it, that passage that goes to Asia. So it was like northeast or northwest, whichever one it is. And if you know about it, he found instead the St. Lawrence River in its basin, like this Gulf of St. Lawrence, which I've actually gone down. I've actually sailed down it, like in a ship a long time ago. Went down the Gulf of St. Lawrence River. I got a cruise. I went down there one time years ago. And I think he got down like we're close to where Quebec and Montreal is today. And if you know about it, Cartier is the one that would coin the name of that part of North America, which is called Canada. The term Canada evolved from a Indian word. I think I want to say the Iroquois, I believe, that lived in that part of Canada, which is from the word you can see there on the bottom there, which is Kanata. Kanata, which meant, I think, in Iroquois or Indian native language tongue, it meant either village or settlement. I think the story went that he was exploring on land, like in that part of Canada. And he asked them, like, hey, where's the nearest village or like Indian village or whatever? And they pointed in one direction. They said, Kanata, like that way, I guess. But you were trying to point like to where a village was. Kanata supposedly meant that. And so Kanata means either village or settlement. And so it kind of stuck later, but the French didn't want to call it that. They wanted to call it New France. That's what they would call the French colony of Canada. And that's the name they would use until I guess British came later and took over the whole thing. And they call it Canada today. Cartier did not colonize. I think he tried to set up a colony there in Canada, like along the St. Lawrence River basin, but it failed. And Samuel de Champlain would come a little later in the early 1600s, and he would be more successful in creating an actual settlement. So that's a little later, of course, when that one happened. So yeah, that's the route that he supposedly took, Cartier, which you can see there, and coming down the river. At least I think that's like the second voyage. So that's kind of the areas of where Quebec and Montreal are going to be, later. All right, then you got Samuel de Champlain, of course, who's well known as well. He's famous for a lot of things. Of course, Champlain was a famous French explorer. He was a French soldier. He was a governor of what would be pretty much the first major governor of what would be New France as a whole. And Champlain was put that on the screen for you later. He's mostly known for his expeditions, like exploration of like the eastern part of Canada. And if you know about Champlain, he was the one that discovered what would be called the Great Lakes, at least some of the Great Lakes, were actually discovered by Champlain on his expeditions. I do have a map showing you, I think right here, all the different travels of Champlain on his expeditions on multiple voyages. You can see he was known for. You can see he explored the east coast of North America, or like around where Nova Scotia is, Maine, coming down to where Massachusetts and Cape Cod is. So he explored there, came down the St. Lawrence River Valley as well. You can see he also explored some of the Great Lakes, like Lake Ontario, I know was discovered by him as well. One of the Great Lakes. I think Lake Erie, it was the other one too. He may have, I think, explored, but he was one of the first. You can see he also skirted like where Lake Huron is, which is right here. So I think it's actually those two, Lake Huron and Lake Ontario, looks like it actually. Also, you can't see it, but he found like Lake Champlain, which is up here. I think he went up into like around where Vermont is. I think he like came, I know when I sailed up here on the east coast of where Maine is, I think he found Bar Harbor. If you know where Bar Harbor is, just on the east coast here and all that. So that's like what he initially did. I'll get to La Salle later about him. But the big thing that he did, Champlain, he came back from his expeditions and he established what is basically a city there on the St. Lawrence River, which you know is, of course, now called Quebec today. Quebec, that's what he's known for. And that led to him, of course, becoming known as the father of New France, because right after that, he founded Quebec in 1608, Quebec City. He would end up being, the first, pretty much the first governor of New France, which I think by the time of like Louis XIII, he's pretty much in power overall. So he's important today. I think if you go to Quebec today, there's actually a statue of him that overlooks the actual St. Lawrence River. It's where that green building is right here, which is, I think it's a hotel. It kind of overlooks the actual river there. I think I've stayed there before. Anyway, it became this fortress city too. It's a very heavily fortified city that they build, of course, overlooking the bluffs of the St. Lawrence River. So that'll be the capital of New France, like until like the 18th century, before the British take over later. So he's the father of New France, Champlain. All right, so let me move on and talk about also another famous explorer that we kind of know as well, of course, which is Robert de La Salle. Of course, you've probably heard of him. It's well known in Louisiana. Everybody's heard of him in Louisiana. There's a lot of schools and streets that are named after La Salle. That's well known. La Salle was this French explorer that was under like the time of Louis XIV, more into the later part of the 17th century. And you can see that La Salle was known for his expeditions that explored the Great Lakes. So he went up into the Great Lakes, like more to the western part of the Great Lakes, like Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, and all that. He also came down the Ohio River. He was one of the first to explore the Ohio River. And then, of course, he was also one of the first to explore the Mississippi River. He was not the first to explore the Mississippi River. Prior to him, you may have heard of the expedition of Joliet and Marquette. That was well known, which was Louis Joliet and Father Marquette. There were these two explorers that were I think one was a priest, a Jesuit priest, and the other was a fur trapper. They explored like the upper part of the Mississippi River down to close to where the Arkansas River is and all that. So he was kind of completing, I guess, the voyage of Joliet and Marquette, which happened in the 70s. Here it is right here if you want. So he's trying to continue that. But what it was, I think, was the French wanted to try to see where the Mississippi River went, because they were kind of curious about that. And so I think they maybe kind of knew it emptied out into where the Gulf of Mexico was. And so what happened was La Salle used Indian-style canoes basically, I think they used the Illinois River, if you know about this, from like where the Great Lakes are. And they were able to connect to the Mississippi River. And then from there, he was able to send it, like go all the way down it to where Louisiana is today. And in what is 1682, La Salle reached the mouth of the river, like where the Gulf of Mexico is. At that point, what happened was he then claimed the whole basin of the Mississippi River, whole thing, and all the land that was associated with it. He claimed it for France and Louis XIV. And I don't know if you know about it. There's like a legend about like what the deal with the name is, or maybe a myth about it. And the name Louisiana actually means the land or country of Louis. It's named after Louis XIV. Some people claim it's named after Louis and Anne, which would be like Queen Anne, I think it was, which Queen Anne was Anne of Austria, who was the mother of Louis XIV, but it wasn't. I think you'll sometimes see it spelled as La Louisiane. I think it's also spelled that way as well, but it's not another woman's name in it. So it's just the land of Louis or the country of Louis is what it actually means. So yeah, so he's the first European to really travel the most of the length of the Mississippi River down to the bottom. You can see there was the second expedition he had where he actually, what he did, he had a second voyage, which was from about 1684 to 87, which I think involved more men. And he tried to seek the mouth of the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico, from the south, come up from the bottom, try to find it that way, because they were going to try to colonize that part of what would be, I guess, the southern part of New France. And what happened was his men ended up in Texas, like southern Texas, on the coast there. And his men, some of them mutinied against him, and he was killed, like by his own men. So kind of a tragic story about what happened to La Salle. But the French would later come back, if you know about it, and they would start, establishing Louisiana as part of like a colony for the French under what is New France. And later on, they're going to, establish New Orleans. Will be established, I think by 1718, they'll establish New Orleans as an actual, major city down there. But for a long time, the colony in Louisiana was not that successful compared to New France, which New France, had a lot of, they had fur trade and all that, the fur trade, which was a big part of their economy. But they had other French explorers. I was kind of going through the main ones that are, of course, well known. Yeah, here's a kind of a route you can see, but you can see he took different routes on his expeditions. You can see he was one of the first to explore the Ohio River coming down this way from the Great Lakes. And then you can see he then on that other voyage came through the Great Lakes, came down the Illinois River, and then came down the actual entire thing. I don't think he actually went up into Minnesota. I think they thought he went up this way too. I think he explored this way also up the river as well. You can see that's where he was killed right here. All right. Also, let me get into for a few minutes, and I'll also talk about another explorer. Now, the Russians, believe it or not, were involved in some expeditions too. There was a explorer that was actually from Denmark. He was Danish, named Vitus Bering, who the Russians called Ivan Ivanovich Bering, I think they call him. He was a famous explorer that was in like the early part of the 18th century. And if you know about it, in the 18th century, the Russians were trying to colonize like Siberia. And they were curious about what was to the east of Siberia. So under the ruler of Russia at the time, Empress Elizabeth, who was one of the daughters of, one of the last daughters of Peter the Great, she was the ruler at the time. She's one that got him to go on this expedition to discover what was east of Siberia. And so I think I've got some maps showing you some of his expeditions that he was known for, Vitus Bering. You can see here, he had like two expeditions. He had some that were actually earlier that were like, it's like close to 1730 that he had. But you can see he was the one that discovered like the Bering Strait, the Bering Sea. All that was found by him. Kamchatka Peninsula was also found by Bering as well. Later expedition, 1730s, 1740s, you can see he explored part of the Pacific Ocean, came up to the Gulf of Alaska, and discovered like Alaska. That's one thing he's known for. I think some of his men, they believe, also discovered, I believe, the Yukon River is in part of Alaska. And Aleutian Islands, of course, he found that too, on that chain on the end of Alaska as well. Bering Island, which is right here, is where his expedition ended. And Bering actually died on the expedition at the end. He didn't make it back. So it's got named after him, which is right there. So why is this important about his expedition Bering? Well, if you know about it, what happened because of what Bering did, the Russians came back later. And they started colonizing Alaska, which you'll see, I think by the time of, I want to say, Catherine the Great in the late 18th century, they start actually trying to colonize some of those areas along that east coast. And you know where Sitka is in Alaska? Sitka, Alaska. That was originally a Russian city that they founded there. And the Russians mostly went in there because of the fur trade. But there wasn't too many Russians there. I think it was mostly native peoples that were there in Alaska that lived there the most. What happened over time was the Russians, like the Russian Empire declined later, they decided to sell Alaska to the United States in 1867. This happened under President Andrew Johnson, who had a Secretary of State named William Seward. He's one that was involved in the purchase of it. Forget how much it was. But they later called the purchase of Alaska the United States. They called it Seward's Folly because they thought that Alaska was a bunch of icebergs up there, polar bears. And we weren't going to get much money out of that. But later on, if you know what happened, they found gold, like in the Yukon Valley and all that, Yukon River area. And they also, of course, later found oil as well. And so now Alaska is pretty profitable, But I think still a lot of people don't live there and all that. So anyway, that's pretty much my lecture, of course, on the explorers for today. So this will be, like I said, 2 lectures I'm going to have, of course, on the age of discovery and exploration of the world. Of course, I am going to have a Canvas quiz on. I'm not going to give it to you today. Of course, I'll probably wait till Thursday to give it to you because you still got that Reformation one to do, and I want you to kind of digest, this lecture with the one before, go over that. Make sure you take some notes on it, and don't forget, like I said, that Reformation quiz, I did give you an extra day on it. So if you want to, if you haven't finished that, you need to get that done. You get up to 2 attempts on it. Don't forget for the Reformation quiz. That one's kind of easy because you only have 1 lecture really to go on. I know they had a second lecture, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that one on the first exam later. So we'll just kind of use that later. But like I said, if you have any comments, questions about the lecture, let me know later. You can send me comments, questions, through my YouTube channel and all that. I guess I don't have any today. I don't see any questions today. So yeah, just make sure, like, if you want to ask me, if you have comments, questions during the lecture, just let me know during the live stream. That's great about that. But I guess nobody has any. So that's it for today. Thursday, I'll have an announcement coming up. Of course, I'm going to get more into the conquest of the New World. I'll talk mostly about the conquistadors, like Hernan Cortez and Pizarro. Probably heard of them. So we'll have a lecture on that coming up. There might even be a video assignment on that coming up soon as well that I sometimes do on the conquistadors. So I'll get to them later and all that. But that's it for today. I hope you're all having a great week, week 3 in the semester. Like I said, if you have any questions, comments about this lecture, let me know later through my YouTube channel. And if you have, like I said, a question about the class, just email me and all that. So y'all take care. And I'll see y'all later in the week. Okay? So bye.